Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Live Ones college football preview, and today we've got to do it. We're previewing the conference that was the opening salvo and the insanity that was 2021. The endless, never-ending sugar rush of 55 to 52 football games where quarterbacks throwing for 500 yards and becoming number one future NFL draft picks who completely crash and burn after they go pro are the norm. I'm talking, of course, about the Big 12, which was already just 10 teams after Nebraska and Texas A&M left. Then the only two reasons the conference has any respectability whatsoever, Oklahoma and Texas, announced last September they'd be leaving to go be bottom feeders in the SEC and taking all that sweet, sweet, sweet money with them. Ironically, it would turn out that 2021 would be the first time since 1998 that neither Texas or Oklahoma played for the conference title. It was not a banner year for the conference at all last year. Kansas lost to Coastal Carolina again. That's becoming a norm. Kansas also lost to Duke. West Virginia went down to a terrible Maryland team. Iowa State got absolutely spanked by Iowa in week 2 in a game where everyone had come into the season saying, this is Iowa State's year. This is the year they get over the hump. Not so much. That same week, number 15, Texas, you can go ahead and say it. Texas is back. It's a meme. They got so thoroughly humiliated on the road by Arkansas, and this was before anyone knew just how good Arkansas was going to be last year. I didn't stop laughing for the rest of that week, honest to God. No one, however, had a more disappointing season than Oklahoma. Nearly lost to Tulane in their opener, nearly lost to Nebraska in week 3, never looked as good as their ranking all year long, and when the year ended, lost to Baylor, lost to Oklahoma State, and suddenly the Big 12 finally, rightfully, gets shut out of the playoffs. No Notre Dame, no Big 12 champion. Justice is served at last. You can tell from the tone of this intro what I think about this conference. I think the defense optional style of football most of the marquee schools in this conference play lends itself to those schools winding up getting far more undeserved opportunities in the old BCS system and in the playoffs than any other conference. Certainly the historical record bears that out whenever they face off against teams from other Power 5 conferences on the national stage the past 25 years. But I'd be remiss if I didn't do a deep dive into them anyway, because there's people out there who honestly love 55 to 52 shootouts, and I don't want to tell you that you're wrong for liking what you like. So here you go. Go ahead and huff about 4 or 5 lines of cocaine to get yourself in the proper mood. Let's tackle the Big 12. We're going to start with Baylor. Man, oh man, nobody expected this team to be so damn good last year. Certainly not me. Dave Arenada, it seemed like he had every possible break go his way, but he followed the foundation laid down by Matt Rule before him. Traditional balanced offense and defense. That gets the job done. This was a team that was 10th in the nation in scoring defense, and a lot of that came from some guys who were just absolute wizards at generating turnovers. I want to highlight senior safety Christian Morgan. I can't even remember the last time I spotlighted a Big 12 safety. Probably never. It's very easy to forget they exist. But Morgan has notched 114 career tackles, 1 sack, 5.5 tackles for loss, 4 interceptions, 8 broken up passes in 4 seasons. He has to be the leader of a depleted secondary. Huge junior defensive tackle Saikai Ika anchors the front 4. This guy is just inhuman. Second team All Big 12. The former LSU transfer made 24 tackles with 3.5 sacks and 6 tackles for loss last season. The offense is in a rebuild, and you shouldn't expect them to be even middle of the road this year. The Bears have still given no indication who's going to be their quarterback. Their best weapon from last year, Abram Smith, is now a New Orleans Saint, and all of their top receiving targets are gone. This is not going to be another 12-win season for Baylor. Their schedule is a monster. Their 6 road games are BYU, Oklahoma, Texas, Iowa State, Texas Tech, and West Virginia. With all that, plus the talent this team lost, I just don't see them doing any better than like 8-4 this year. I think that's their ceiling. Excuse me. Iowa State. Man, what a horrible disappointment. There was talk of this team challenging Oklahoma for the Big 12 title game at the beginning of the season last year. There was just so much hype. Not so much this year. Brock Purdy is gone. Breece Hall is gone. This team is just a ton of question marks on offense. It's going to be on senior wide receiver Xavier Hutchinson to carry the load with the new quarterback. He was first team All Big 12 last year. He's been a great consistent threat downfield the last 2 years, averaging 12 yards a catch. The defense was fantastic last year, probably the team's lone bright spot. The standout there is the smallish but explosive 2-time first-team All-Big 12 defensive end Will McDonald. He had a phenomenal 2021, 11.5 sacks, 14 tackles for loss, and 36 tackles overall with 5 forced fumbles. You look at this guy and you could see right away that he's very, very small for a defensive end, but he's slippery. He makes great moves, and he pretty much lives behind the line of scrimmage. If this guy does get drafted, I imagine they're going to move him into like an outside linebacker, edge rusher type of role. Even then, he needs to put on some weight. For now, he's the best piece on the Cyclones. Schedule-wise, all I can say is that a lot of Big 12 games are winnable when you have a good defense. I don't think this team is going to be as good on defense as they were last year, but they should be good enough to take most of the 50-50 games and steal at least one of the big games, maybe that Baylor one at home. 7-5, I think, is reasonable expectations. Kansas. I don't even think the fans know that Kansas is playing a football season this fall. They're still riding high off of that March Madness championship in April. As it is, Lance Leipold did show improvement in this team last year, even if it wound up being a 2-10 season. The excitement, such as it is in new quarterback Jalen Daniels. He took over late in the season and became a real live, consistent passer for a Kansas attack that just hasn't known a whole lot of steadiness at that position. And he gets the benefit of an offensive line that actually kept him pretty clean last year and returns 4 of its starters. The defense. Oh, boy. This defense might have been the absolute worst defense in all of Division I football last year, and that's not an exaggeration. They weren't worst overall at every statistical category, but they were second to third worst in the country at way, way too many. I'm not just talking in the Power 5. I'm talking everybody. Fortunately, the transfer portal is helping out big time here. Miami University's Lonnie Phelps will instantly be the team's top pass rusher. He made 8.5 sacks for the Redhawks last year. You got Jarrett Paul coming in from Rutgers, who could start at safety right away. Schedule-wise, absolutely no one expects this team to be in the mix at the top of the conference. Just, continue to show improvement. And they have some winnable games. Tennessee Tech is a win. Duke should be a win, man. Duke might have taken Kansas's place as the worst team in all of the Power 5. So we just need a third win in there somewhere. And I think it just might be that home date on October 8th against TCU. Call me crazy, but I think the Jayhawks might be able to pull that one off. So 3-9, I think. 3-9 is a very, very good expectation for the Kansas Jayhawks here. Kansas State actually did quite a bit better than expected last year. The first 3 years under Chris Kleiman have been, pretty solid. I think this program might be poised to be one of the classes of the new conference after Texas and Oklahoma leave. This year's going to be interesting as the Wildcats are bringing in a veteran grad transfer in Adrian Martinez to be their quarterback. Martinez, the classic prototypical dual threat quarterback, he threw for close to 8,500 yards and ran for over 2,300 with 35 touchdowns in 4 years for Nebraska. Don't expect to see this guy in the NFL next year. This is his last hurrah, so he's going to try and ball out like a madman. While Martinez isn't running, the Wildcats' offense centers around junior all-purpose running back Deuce Vaughn. He has rushed for 2,034 yards, averaging 5.7 yards a carry, with 25 touchdowns in his 2 years. And he, in addition to that, caught 74 passes for 902 yards and 6 scores. You put those two pieces together along with an offensive line that's returning most of their starters, and this is a Kansas State team that should be greatly improved on offense. The defense, not that it's a big hurdle to get over, but it was one of the best in the Big 12 last year. Unfortunately, it lost a lot of starters to graduation, and it's filling roles through the transfer portal, particularly in the linebacker core. I'm actually interested to see what Will Hannes can do. He was a standout at Nebraska. He had 139 career tackles, 4 sacks, 12.5 tackles for loss in 3 seasons before he missed all of last year with a knee injury. So in short, I think this team takes a big step forward on offense over last year and a slight step backward on defense as all the new arrivals see if they can gel together as a unit. Looking at the schedule, South Dakota, Tulane, and Kansas should all be easy wins. Missouri, Texas Tech, at TCU, and at West Virginia should all be 50-50 toss-ups. Unfortunately, they do get Oklahoma, Baylor, and Iowa State on the road. All of those should probably be losses. They get Texas at home, which I think could be very interesting. That's a date to circle, believe it or not. Obviously, Texas is never as good as the preseason hype, as we've covered time and time again. Depth is just a big concern for Kansas State. They're going to have to live and die by injuries. But as long as everybody can stay healthy, I think this is another 7-win season again. Maybe 8 if they can upset Texas. We'll see. Oklahoma, where the wind comes sweeping down the plain. What in the world are we going to do with Oklahoma? First, they decide to upend the college football world by leaving for the SEC. Then their highly touted quarterback of the future, Spencer Rattler, looked like dog shit the first couple of weeks of the season, almost losing to a bad Nebraska team and getting himself benched. Caleb Williams came in and took over, but the nonstop sugar rush passing attack flow just isn't there like it was under Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, to a lesser extent under Jalen Hurts when he was there. And the defense is just the typical Big 12 defense. It allowed 400 yards a game. And then, the man who made all that nonstop success the past 5 years, Lincoln Riley, announces before the end of the season that he's leaving for the job at USC. And, oh, by the way, your quarterback, Caleb Williams, is leaving through the transfer portal with him. And Spencer Rattler's already out the door for South Carolina. And the team just doesn't even care for the Bedlam Bell game. You could see it all over their body language. Not only does Oklahoma not win the Big 12, they aren't even in the conference title game. Enter Brent Venables. Honestly, the best hire they could have made under the circumstances. He was the defensive coordinator during those early years under Bob Stoops, became the DC at Clemson, when it was really, really rocking under Dabo Swinney. But can he take the baton? Offensive coordinator Jeff Lebby is coming in from Ole Miss. I mean, it's a ready-made recipe for success. All the ingredients are there. There's just, a question about the talent. Dylan Gabriel's coming in from UCF to take over quarterback duties, while highly touted freshman Nick Evers is learning the new system. Gabriel was just absolutely stellar at UCF for his first 2 years before he lost most of last season to a collarbone injury. Over 8,000 yards, 70 touchdowns, only 14 interceptions on his career. I would say this represents a step up in competition for him, but honestly, with how non-existent defenses tend to be in this conference, he should be able to ball out even more as long as he's healthy. I think this might wind up being a statistical year that propels him right up to an eventual NFL draft selection. He's that good, which is honestly probably why he made the transfer. I can't wait to see him throw to Marvin Mims, the number one receiver on the team the past 2 years. Mims is the classic high-octane deep threat, averages 22 yards of reception. 22 yards of reception, that's his average. Freaking crazy to think about. There are questions about this team's offensive line. It allowed a ton of sacks last year, but at the very least, it's returning most of its starters and should be more experienced. The defense, God, man, I remember preseason last year when Oklahoma was actually ranked number one for a while last year, and all their fans were saying, this is the year we've got the pieces, this is the year we've got the defense figured out, we're not going to be defense optional this year, we're going right straight to that national title. Man, what a crock that turned out to be. And they lost 6 of their starters from last year, including their 3 leading tacklers. I never expect the Sooners defense to be special, but this year is going to be particularly problematic. There are going to be a lot of shootouts this year. Schedule-wise, they are Oklahoma. They're going to beat a lot of teams just based on the recruiting. Their out-of-conference games are UTEP, Kent State, and at Nebraska. I know Nebraska gave them trouble last year, and that'll be the game everyone's watching early. I think Venables and Gabriel are going to want to make that a statement game. That actually might wind up being a blowout. Baylor should be a winnable game this year. Kansas State might give them a bit of trouble, but I just don't think they have the depth to hang like we were talking about when we reviewed them, especially in with the game being in Norman. TCU's a cakewalk. That Texas game, the Red River rivalry, is going to be some crazy 62-55 shootout. Who knows who's going to win that one, honestly. It's going to be like last year, whoever has the ball last. Iowa State is rebuilding. Really, the games that are likely to give them trouble are the Bedlam Bell game in Week 12 against Oklahoma State and going on the road against Texas Tech to close it out. Texas Tech's going to be better than people think this year. But I do think that this team's absolute floor is 3 losses. 9-3 is the worst I think they can do. If this winds up being a 7-5 season, people are immediately going to think that Venables was a bust of a hire. Oklahoma State. With Texas and Oklahoma leaving, the stage is set for the Cowboys to stake their claim and say, we run this conference now. To just own recruiting among the traditionalists in the region who have no interest in going and playing SEC ball, to absolutely dominate and keep the conference relevant. The 2022 Oklahoma State team is going to be terrific. Spencer Sanders is back at quarterback. After earning first-team All-Big 12 honors, he threw for over 2,800 yards with 20 touchdowns to go along with 664 rushing yards and 6 scores. I know he shit the bed in the Big 12 title game with the 4 interceptions, but he more than made up for it in the Fiesta Bowl against a tough Notre Dame defense. So I don't think character is going to be an issue in bouncing back for this year. 7 of the top 8 receivers are back from last year, so consistency there isn't going to be a problem. This team under Mike Gundy has always been the antithesis of Big 12 programs with its strong emphasis on defense. This team was number 1 in the nation in sacks, second in tackles for loss, and led the Big 12 in total and scoring defense last year. The Cowboys, they just lived in the backfield. They averaged 4 sacks a game. It was incredible to watch that defense. I really, really enjoyed just watching this team last year. Colin Oliver led the team with 10.5 sacks, but the young end's going to have to share time with Trace Ford, who's back from a knee injury. Trace Ford is somebody that everybody has pegged as being a future NFL pick. And Tyler Lacey and Brock Martin are back after combining for 12.5 sacks. Basically, you can expect everyone in the front four to eat. There are going to be games where all 4 of these guys have at least 1 sack. I mean, this defense is that good, and it's just incredible. The only question about this group is the linebacker core. Now that Malcolm Rodriguez is off, with the Detroit Lions. If teams are going to have any success against the Cowboys, it's going to come via the mid-range pass, crossing routes over the middle, anything that tests that linebacker core. Looking at the schedule, there's no reason not to get back to the Big 12 championship game for this team. They don't even leave home until October. The Baylor game on the road is going to be tough. Texas Tech right afterwards is going to be a problem, but they do get them at home. The Texas game is in Stillwater. I think they're going to embarrass the Longhorns in that game. I really, really do. At Kansas State, I think the Cowboys are definitely going to be favored. They get Iowa State at home. The Bedlam Bell game is obviously going to be their biggest challenge. But there's no reason this team can't make this a 10 or even an 11-win season with this defense and finally get back to that Big 12 title. TCU. Whoa. Oh, boy, that did not go as planned, did it? So much so that after 21 years and 6 conference championships, Gary Patterson had to make for the exits halfway before the season before he was forced to leave in a much less auspicious fashion, probably swiftly kicked out the door on his ass. And now the program brings in Sonny Dykes, the man who finally at long last resurrected SMU from 30 years of post-death penalty doldrums. Interestingly, TCU is getting SMU's coach at the same time that 3 of the teams he battled with every year in the American Conference are also coming to the Big 12. After going 16-18 over the last 3 seasons, TCU needs Dykes to stake a claim to the new top tier of the conference after Texas and Oklahoma leave. You're going to find out that's a common theme. Fortunately for Dykes, the Horned Frogs do have some good pieces to work with, particularly in the wide receiver core. Chief among them is their deep threat, senior wide receiver Quentin Johnson. It's one of the Big 12's most dangerous playmakers, honestly. He averaged over 20 yards per catch over his 2 seasons. Again, guys who average over 20 yards a catch, think about that mathematically. That means, as a median, half of their catches are more than 20 yards. Just crazy when you have that kind of consistency, that kind of deep threat. That's something you just don't see a whole lot, even at the college level. Anyway, this guy has just been waiting for his chance to blow up for a 1,000-yard season and a ticket to the NFL, and this is the year he could get it. The defense is helmed by senior linebacker D. Winter. In 3 seasons, he's notched 167 tackles, 5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, and 7 broken-up passes. Quarterback, obviously, is a question mark. Max Duggan didn't exactly set the world on fire, especially when you put him up against some of the other Big 12 guys. But for that, I think this team would be a lock to get back to a winning season because of their out-of-the-conference schedule. It's a piece of cake. But they do get Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Iowa State at home. Maybe they'll steal one of those games. I don't know. At Texas and at Baylor are going to be their only tough road games. As it is, I think they'll be fine. There's only 4 games I think for sure they can't win, and they'll probably lose another one of those 50-50 toss-ups. So call it a 7-5 year for this program. It's going to be an important rebuilding step. All right, here we go. Texas. The motherfucking Texas Longhorns. Started off last year ranked number 19 in the preseason. You can go back and watch my Big 12 preview from last year where I called bullshit on that. They had no defense and no quarterback. They were a team with 1 player, Bijan Robinson. And there was just no way that they were going to be able to hang with any team that they couldn't score 40 points on. I didn't care that Steve Sarkisian was coming in to coach. And what happened? 99th ranked overall defense in the country. When I talk about Big 12 schools being defense optional, it's not every Big 12 school. Oklahoma State's been a monster on defense under Mike Gundy for a long time. Iowa State's had some great defenses, but Texas has always, always, always been the prototypical Big 12 sugar rush. Let's score 55 points as fast as we can, and it doesn't matter if the other team scores 52 because it's still a win. And the Longhorns went, wait for it, 5-7, just like always. This team is always horrible, and their delusional fucking fan base that thinks you can win football games with nothing but offense comes back year after year after year and hypes this team and its recruiting up and says, this is the year, to the point where Texas is back is a meme. It's a joke that everybody outside of the Texas fan base is in on, but they're not. They take it seriously. And it's happening again this year. This team is somehow number 18 again in the preseason coaches poll. Someone, not sure who, actually gave them a first place vote. There's a college football coach somewhere that honestly thinks Texas is the number one team in football right now. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Nick Saban, because he's got to hype up his marquee out of conference matchup in order for Alabama's strength of schedule. I just don't. Who? Anyway, so what's actually going to happen? Well, Quinn Ewers couldn't hack it at Ohio State, so he's transferred back to his home state to fill in while hype machine in waiting Arch Manning gets acclimated to college-level ball. There's no tape on Ewers because he never got on the field at Ohio State. You have to actually go back to his high school days where he was the top-ranked quarterback in the state of Texas, as if that actually means anything. Bijan Robinson will be the offense again as he kills time until he gets drafted by some desperate NFL team who thinks he's worth spending a first-round pick on. Now, admittedly, he's got NFL-level talent. The kid is no joke. Averaged almost 6 yards a carry, got 1,100 yards with 11 touchdowns and 4 receiving scores, despite being banged up over the second half of the year and out for the final 2 games. When he's right, when he's good, he's got the ability to carry this team all on his own. The receiving core is outstanding by Big 12 standards. Xavier Worthy is a first-team All-Big 12 talent, coming off a 62-catch, 981-yard, 12-touchdown season. You can expect him to be on an NFL team at some point as well. I'm not going to spotlight anyone's on this team's defense because it's a crime to even call it a defense. It has no pass rush. None. You can't not have at least a semblance of a pass rush going up against Big 12 quarterbacks and expect to win many games. Schedule-wise, oh my God, week 2. This team had the absolute balls to accept an out-of-conference game against fucking Alabama. I absolutely cannot wait. This team's going to beat ULM like 52-24 or something obscene like that in the opener, and they're going to hype up that game all freaking week. They're somehow going to justify giving Texas like a top 10 ranking. Just you watch. And then Alabama's going to come into Austin and absolutely shut them down. It's going to be a walkthrough game for them, and that'll demoralize the hell out of this team. They'll have almost all their toughest games on the road, at Texas Tech, at Oklahoma State, at Kansas State, and a neutral site game against Oklahoma. Those could all conceivably be losses. Assume they win one of those by accident. 8-4 team. That's the absolute best you're going to get. 7-5, much more likely. God, I can't wait for these idiots to go bang their head against the wall as the bottom feeders of the SEC for the next 2 or 3 decades. Okay. Texas Tech did exactly what I thought they'd do. They beat everyone that they should have beaten and lost to everyone that they should have lost to. But that means that the school finally saw enough of Matt Wells. He was going to be shown the door after a 3-5 start to the season, and it became clear that the program was never going to get any better under him. Enter Joey McGuire in his first full-time head coaching gig. He is supposed to be a defensive-minded coach, having been a defensive position coach for virtually all of his career. That's going to be interesting, given this program's identity over the last couple of decades as like Texas Light, basically. I mean, just emphasis after emphasis, all offense all the time. And it's not like that part's going away. I mean, McGuire's brought in Zach Kitley, who was the architect behind Houston Baptist, that big-time offense of 2020, and last year went to Western Kentucky and built the Air Raid. But this is the first year of the new regime, and it's not clear who the quarterback's going to be yet to run it. Whoever it is going to have the benefit of likely number 1 receiver, Miles Price, to work with. Price is your prototypical speedy deep threat who averaged 14 yards of reception last year, but he didn't get many looks playing across the field from Eric I can't never pronounce this name, Ezukanma. I think I got it, Eric Ezukanma. Anyway, he's now a Miami Dolphin, so he's not on the team anymore, so expect Price to light up the scoreboard if the right quarterback emerges. The rumors of Texas Tech having a defense have always been that. Just rumors. Honestly, this wasn't the worst defense in the Big 12. No one was worse than Kansas, but it still needs a lot of help. The worst part was in the secondary, which was dead last in the Big 12. They allowed 268 passing yards a game. That has to get better. Schedule-wise, at the very least, they get Oklahoma, Texas, and Baylor at home. I actually think that Texas game might wind up being a shootout win. We went over how bereft of talent Texas is on defense. The toughest out-of-conference game that this team has is definitely on the road against NC State. They also have to play Houston, which isn't going to be a walk in the park. But they, if they actually are improved on defense this year and the right quarterback emerges, there's no reason this can't be a 6-6 team. There's no reason they can't get to a bowl game. Last but not least, the West Virginia Mountaineers. Again, a team that did exactly what everyone thought they'd do, which was go 500. It's kind of been Neil Brown's MO since getting poached from Troy. So enter their new offensive coordinator, Graham Harrell, who was, back in his day was a Heisman candidate quarterback from Texas Tech, former backup to Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, former offensive coordinator for Clay Helton's USC Trojans. Pretty good get for the Mountaineers, honestly, especially considering the goal is to put a spark back in this team's offense. And who's coming in to run that offense at quarterback? JT Daniels. Wait, that JT Daniels? The guy who was just on Georgia's national championship team last year and would come in whenever Stetson Bennett was stinking up the joint? Yep, that's him. Obviously wanted somewhere where he wouldn't be in a competition. He should jump into the starting job right away. When Daniels is on, he's on. He's an extremely accurate passer who makes great reads and he can make throws in a very tight windows. Those SEC defenses are no joke. Only concerns about him, obviously, are his durability. He does have a history of injuries, and his mobility. Guy is a statue in the pocket. Can't really make moves to avoid a pass rush. Fortunately, that's not going to be too much of a problem in the Big 12, so he should be fine on that front. Top receiver Winston Wright is gone, but Bryce Ford Wheaton is back after catching 42 passes for 575 yards and 3 scores. And Sam James returns after making 42 catches for 505 yards and 5 touchdowns. This is not a sexy group of wide receivers. But with Daniels throwing to them, who knows? He might make 1 or 2 of them a star. The defense is pretty much all new, with 10 guys coming in through the transfer portal, some of whom are definitely going to win starting jobs right away. I'd keep an eye on linebacker Jasir Cox, who lit up the FCS at North Dakota State, registered 58 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 3 interceptions, and 2 pass breakups in 14 games played. Schedule-wise, oh, man, these guys get a meat grinder of a road schedule. At Pitt, at Virginia Tech, at Texas Tech, at Iowa State, at Oklahoma State. They'll probably win like 2 of them as 50-50 toss-ups, but their home slate is not a cakewalk either. Oklahoma and Baylor will probably both be losses. This is likely to be a 6-6 team again, but hopefully laying the groundwork for recruiting on the offensive side of the ball for the future. So there you have it. The last year, these 10 teams make up the conference. The last year, the conference looks anything like it does now. I think Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are the prohibitive favorites to be playing in the conference title game. Baylor might be in the mix depending on how the head-to-head matchups go, and don't sleep on Kansas State if they can stay healthy. But none of these teams should be in the college football playoff, quite frankly. Next up will be the trash conference of the Power 5 last year that's hopefully a lot more like its usual form this year. We'll tackle the ACC. I will see you next time.